Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm VoxDay, voxday.blogspot.com, and Infogalactic News. You may notice that I am wearing a SJWs Always Lie t-shirt tonight. This is very appropriate because I have absolutely no doubt that what I'm going to say is going to get, not what I'm going to say, but the title of this Darkstream is going to get completely spun out of context by the SJWs, which will be amusing because, of course, the reason that I'm addressing this is because I've been reading a little bit more about. It's not troll bait, actually. It's specific. It's very specific. I've been reading about World War II a bit today. And it got me thinking about something that I've seen people say. In fact, somebody actually said it in the comments on a Darkstream last night. And they said, Hitler did nothing wrong. Now, that is something that you sometimes see out of the alt-white. You know, you see out of the people that consider themselves simultaneously white nationalists. I don't even know when Purim is, or Purim, or whatever it's called. So no, I pay absolutely no attention to other religion holidays. I couldn't tell you when the Hindu ones are either. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there is a vast and long list of things that Hitler did very, very wrong. You know, what you see out of there's a reason why when the alt-white was coming after me because of my effrontery in daring to do what they considered to be their territory, when I laid out the 16 points of the alt-right, which again are a taxonomy. It's not an attempt to define anything. It's a description. You know, I could define 10 points of communism too. Wouldn't make me a communist. No, and it's not true to say that losers must have done something wrong. There's plenty of reasons. You know, just the fact that Germany lost World War II does not mean that they necessarily did anything wrong. You know, sometimes you can be attacked. Without, you know, there's plenty of wars that start that people don't want. Okay, but let's review some of the errors, some of the things that Hitler did wrong, just so when you see this sort of idiotic rhetoric from these very foolish, historically ignorant people, you can point it out. So first of all, the very first thing that actually, I shouldn't say the very first thing, but I'll just say that the first thing that I'm going to mention, and the first thing that is so absolutely and utterly stupid is, like ABC Scotty just said, he committed the act that people say, you know, there's military there's stupidity, there's military stupidity, and there's invading Russia in winter stupidity. Okay, now, Hitler made the same mistake that Napoleon made. Hitler made the same mistake that the neocons want to make. He got involved in a war with Russia. He tried to invade Russia. You know, King Charles of Sweden was one of the great military minds of history. Napoleon was one of the great military minds of history. Both of them invaded Russia. Both of them lost. And there's a reason for that. No, it's not overconfidence. It's called logistics. There's a saying that amateurs study tactics, amateurs study strategy, and professionals study logistics. Fighting on two fronts, that's another one on my list. But the big thing is, if you look at the size of Russia, I love Ann Barnhart, but if anyone who wants war with Russia is stupid. Anyone who wants war with Russia is foolish. Anyone who wants war with Russia doesn't understand what they're talking about, doesn't understand the complexities involved. Okay? Russia is a massive, massive place with a fairly sparse population. No, it wasn't the postponement of Barbarossa that was fatal. It was always going to fail. Why? Why was it always going to fail? Well, think about it. The standard equation of offense versus defense is that you need to have a 3-to-1 material advantage on the offense. Okay, we got this. I'm going to get rid of this guy. You have to have a 3-to-1 advantage. Now, if you're going to defend, you can expect to successfully defend with 1/3 the forces. So a lot of people have said, well, Hitler was going to go to war with Russia anyhow. Stalin was planning to attack Germany and so forth. And that may well have been true. But Stalin was years away from being able to do that because he had recently purged his entire officer corps. And so, yes, and the only successful invasion of Russia was by Genghis Khan. Why was that? Who can tell me why Genghis Khan was able to be successful? I've already given you the clue. I've already told you the fundamental problem. Now, it's not speed. It's because Mongolian logistics meant that they didn't need much in the way of supplies. They moved quickly. They had no supply lines. And so they were able to live off the land. The French army actually took Moscow. This is what's funny. What a lot of people don't realize. They say, well, if the Nazis came to within sight of Moscow, and if they had been able to if they had started sooner, they would have taken Moscow, and then they would have won the war. No, they wouldn't have. Napoleon took Moscow. And the same thing happened to him. They ended up, both Napoleon and Nazi Germany and Hitler completely sacrificed most of their fighting forces. Most of them. More than 2/3 of Germany's forces were devoted to the Eastern Front. And so they sacrificed the greater part of their fighting forces in a futile manner and stretched them out. And it didn't matter that the German soldiers were the best fighting force that the world had ever seen at that point. It didn't matter that they had the very best equipment. It didn't matter that they had excellent tactics. It didn't matter that they had an excellent officer corps, because they were doomed by the logistics of the situation. Now, this should concern any idiot who really wants to pursue war with Russia, because there's no possible chance that they're going to win. None. Now, in fairness, the same is also true for the United States. There was absolutely no chance that Japan was ever going to invade the United States. They had no plans of doing so. They knew that they would lose a war with the United States. Why? The same reason as Russia. The United States is protected by the difficulty of logistics. The only way that the United States can lose is if it's foolish enough to permit a massive invasion of, let's say 80 million people. Empires die from the inside. The Soviet Union fell from the inside. And so, yeah, it's true. 4GW is a way around that, but and that's why the United States, if you look at Russia, and the conventional thinker looks at Russia and looks at the United States and says, look, the United States is wealthy and powerful and has great technology and all that sort of thing. I can tell you right now, Russia is in a much better position than the United States is. Because Russia is mostly Russian. The United States is not mostly American. Or it may still be mostly American, but it is much less American than Russia is Russian. And so let's go back to Hitler. Let's talk about some more of his mistakes. Okay. So remember the original plan, the original idea of the Germanic expansion. When people talk about white nationalism and National Socialism, and they talk about them as if they're the same thing, they demonstrate that they understand neither, because the two things are fundamentally incompatible. National Socialism is about Teutonic supremacy. It is actually, it is a hyper-nationalist ideology. It is one that is devoted to actual supremacy. It's not white supremacy. It's German supremacy. Germans are fundamentally different than Austrians, than Poles, than Swedes, than Brits, than the French, than the Russians, all of whom can reasonably be considered white. So it's obviously not about white supremacy. It's obviously not about white nationalism. White nationalism is an American phenomenon. White nationalism is not a European thing. Europeans believe in distinct European nationalisms, Scottish nationalism. Scotland is currently part of an all-white, well, nominally, all-white Great Britain, United Kingdom. Why is Scotland on the verge of voting a second time for independence? Because Scotland is a separate nation than England. Scotland is a separate nation. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of the... Look, don't talk about volume, okay? If you talk about volume, you get blocked, because we go through this all the time. So anyhow, the point is that... No problem. The point is that there is no... The National Socialism is directly contradictory to white nationalism. National Socialism is all about German supremacy. Now, here's the mistake. Yeah, I know we're not. I know all about Scots loving the EU. We're aware of that. It's very stupid, but whatever. The point is that they do not want to be ruled by the English. And so the here's the next huge mistake. Okay, Hitler was able to get away with taking the Sudetenland. He was able to get away with the Austrian Anschluss. So he concluded, because the Western powers didn't do anything about that they weren't going to do anything about Czechoslovakia either. And he was wrong, because obviously France and Great Britain declared war on him after that. So, but the problem was, after he even though they declared war, then he ended up getting involved, and then he ended up being successful. And like so many people, he was doomed by his failure to learn the lesson of his early successes. He believed that he could keep doing the same thing, that doing the same thing would continue to work. And he was wrong. So it worked in Poland. The Soviets helped him. They divided the country with him. It worked in Czechoslovakia. It worked in, he was able to take the Netherlands. He was able to take all of those. Why didn't France and Great Britain? Because France and Great Britain didn't declare war on Germany over Poland. They had an alliance with Czechoslovakia, and that's why they declared war on Germany. And so that was the huge mistake. That was the huge mistake that Hitler made, was he thought that he could keep pushing outward, and he thought that he made the same mistake that Napoleon did. He tried to build a continent-wide German empire, an empire ruling over other nations. Is this starting to sound familiar again? What do we see Americans doing? The same damn thing. And so, we've had a quasi, it's not an American empire. It's not a true empire in Europe, but it's pretty close to what would have been called a satrapy. So, so the thing is that empires are fundamentally weak. This is what people don't understand. Empires always have fissions and fractures based on the nationalities over which they rule, and what we usually find is that empires bankrupt themselves. Yes, it's largely due to the lack of homogeneity. And so when you've got whether it's Americans trying to rule economically over the globe, whether it's Napoleon attempting to impose the continental system on Europe and installing his relatives as kings, what Hitler should have absolutely done is he should have stopped and consolidated before Czechoslovakia. That was the bright line he should not have crossed. He could have built up, Germany was on the rise. Now, there are some who argue that, the problem was he engaged in this huge spending program and he had to go to war before the economy fell apart. Well, I think that's ridiculous because, regardless of what happened, what Hitler had already accomplished after the Austrian Anschluss and after taking Poland, because remember, parts of Poland were German-speaking. He had the ability to stop there and build a very, very powerful German nation that would have dominated Europe and been probably the major rival to the United States because of the high-performance German people. It was a major, major mistake. We're talking ruinous mistake for him to try to build this Germanic empire ruling over other folks. I think that this was a typical flaw that many ambitious people have. Once they achieve a goal, once they're able to achieve a goal that especially one that they didn't think they could, they start to believe their own bullshit. They start to believe their own hype. One of my biggest problems that I've had, one of my biggest challenges that I personally have had, is that I had a lot of success, first in the music industry and then in the video game industry at too young an age. And so not only did I fail to capitalize on those early successes very well. No, you're too stupid. I just said precisely the opposite. He did believe his own bullshit. And so the problem you have when you have early success is that you think that success is much easier than it is. I had a really important conversation with a friend of mine. He also had a massive success, a huge, massive success, and then he walked away. He let himself get pushed out of this company that he had just made more money than you would believe if I told you, and he was compensated accordingly, and then he just walked away from it. I didn't say anything about this. I said he should have taken the Sudetenland. I said he should have stopped with taking all of Czechoslovakia. The point. So what my friend said is, he said you need to keep in mind that every opportunity partly has to do with you and your skill, your talent, your abilities, and whatever. But part of it is circumstantial. There will never again be an opportunity now that is the same as it was in the late 1970s when video games first got started. You know, one of my biggest mistakes, one of my biggest failures was when I was 15 years old and my father was making high-resolution graphics cards with resolutions up to 1280 by 1024 and 256 colors. You know, I was really into video games, computer games, and as was my friend. And even though we started a computer game company about 5 years later, it had never occurred to us when we were 15 that we could do that at the time. It had never occurred to us to talk to my father about it and say, hey, you know, why don't we take some programmers and take these crappy little graphic games on the Apple II and do them in this beautiful 1280 resolution. And we could have done this long before MCGA, long before VGA even really existed. Why didn't we do it? Because we didn't see it. But I still had got signed my first record contract at 22. We had 3 Billboard Top 40 Club chart hits, you know, songs and movies, songs and video games. And then when I started my computer game company, the second game we actually finished, we ended up doing 6 million copies of it through bundling deals with Intel. So, so I spent the next 15 years basically trying to sort of replicate those successes by doing the same sort of things. And it wasn't until I talked to my friend that I realized what a huge mistake I'd been making. Because I was trying to recreate a situation that no longer existed. I was trying to do the same sorts of things in a way that it didn't apply. And that's exactly, and it's a mistake that is very, very common to successful people. You know, I see successful people making it all the time. You know, I talked to Curt Schilling. Some of you may know who Curt Schilling is. He was a very successful baseball pitcher. And I talked to him when he was going to start a new computer game company, 38 Studios. And I felt really bad about it later because I said, hey, you know, I'd like to advise you on this stuff, you know, some common mistakes that can be made. He said, no, you know, I've got some great people, you know, very successful people, blah, blah, blah. And then they all promptly went out and lost $75 million. You know, successful people. People with past proven success. But they were trying to do the sort of things that had made them successful in the past. They weren't looking to say, okay, does the situation match what the situation was before? And if it doesn't, then you have to adjust your strategy accordingly. You have to, you know, what we're doing with Castalia House and what we're doing with Alpenwolf and what we're doing with Infogalactic is totally different than the way that I used to approach things in the past, because the way that I approach things in the past is not going to work today. And so it's no surprise that these things are working much better now, because I'm not working off of a failed model. You know, I'm not working off I shouldn't say failed model. I'm not working off of a successful model that is now outdated. And so let's continue. What else? Now, you know, people sometimes wonder about, you know, they say that Hitler made a mistake in targeting the Jews. That's not true. In that case, what people tend to forget is that World Jewry declared war on Germany in 1933. So that war was one that Hitler inherited. It's not one that he started. It's not one that he declared. Now, that doesn't justify the way that he treated the Jews. Remember, most of the Jews that he attacked were not even German. He should not have been in those countries in the first place. He should not have been trying to set up his empire in the first place. There were not that many Jews in Germany proper, or even in the German-speaking territories that he took over initially. So, you know, I mean, yes, obviously, it's not justified to treat the conquered peoples the way that he did, but the point is that he shouldn't have even been in the position to be making that mistake in the first place. A lot of people tend to forget that the whole Einlösung didn't begin until 1941. Well, he hated Jews because Jews were basically raping the German economy after the World War I. And so, plus also the Bolsheviks, who were their primary rivals, what they called the KPD in Germany. The KPD was heavily Jewish, and so there was this internecine struggle on the left between the KPD and the Nazi Party. The Nazis were able to reach out across the center, but whereas the KPD was only on the left, which of course is why the Nazis were able to beat them in the polls. But what's interesting is that when you hear people all the time arguing about the Nazis are right wing and so forth, but if you actually look at the German electoral returns, what you can see is that it was mostly the KPD, the communists, and the Nazis battling to take over the center-left vote. They were, you can just look at the electoral returns and see where the votes were coming from, and so the Nazis were able to appeal to the center, and they were able to appeal to that. But the people, the parties that really lost their votes, to the most part, was the SPD, the socialists, the socialists, and the KPD, the communists. And so, but let's go on. Let's go on to the next mistake: declaring war on the United States. Why on earth would you give the largest industrial power on earth the opportunity to declare war on you just because you are allied with the Japanese? That makes no sense whatsoever. And the other thing is, Hitler never understood the importance of alliances. He did not have an effective alliance with Italy. A lot of people think that he did. It's not true. Italy was actually going to come in on the Allied side. They actually had a formal treaty that meant they were on the side of the French and the British, and then the British screwed them over. They had an agreement. It was a naval agreement, I believe. And it was done in, I think it was the Lausanne Treaty or something like that. Or maybe it was but it was in there. And so no, it wasn't Versailles Treaty. This is a small naval treaty between Italy, France, and Great Britain. And Great Britain had agreed to it and then basically backed out on it and did a separate agreement with Germany. And so Italy realized that they couldn't trust the British, and they ended up becoming allied with the Germans. But it was not a strong alliance, and the Japanese alliance was largely pointless and fatal when it came to declaring war on the United States and giving the United States the opportunity to get directly involved in Europe again. Okay. Now, somebody mentioned the generals. That's true. There was a something called Führerbefehl. A Führerbefehl was a order to the army directly from Hitler. And so usually what it involved was on the Eastern Front, the German generals would need to strategically retreat because the Soviets were creating these huge pockets, cutting off their lines of retreat and capturing large quantities of German troops, and capturing entire armies, capturing entire divisions. And so, the Germans, being very excellent strategically and tactically, had the ability to do fighting withdrawals and save their troops and often save their equipment. But Hitler would step in with these Führerbefehl orders and tell them that they had to stay in place and fight to the last man and so forth, which would inevitably lead to large quantities of these very high quality, high trained troops and very expensive equipment, and all of it would get captured. Huge quantities of Germans captured by the Soviets, and so and all of it because he was overriding his generals. So anyhow, that's just a small list. One of these days I should sit down and make a comprehensive list. But the point is, whenever you see someone saying Hitler did nothing wrong, come back at them and point out that Hitler was a strategic and tactical idiot. He was always doomed to failure. There was absolutely no chance whatsoever that that Nazi Germany was ever going to win. None. He violated nearly every basic principle of warfare because he got away with it. He got away with bluffing very early on. He had the benefit of some great commanders like Erwin Rommel, and the Blitzkrieg strategy taking out France. But after France, that was it. And so, the Third Reich lasted only, 12 years, 1933 to 1945. 12 years. It would still be around today and would be one of the dominant world powers if it wasn't for Hitler. Hitler was probably the greatest disaster to the German people that it had ever known and has ever known, with the possible exception of Angela Merkel. And so, anytime you see anyone, doing anyone who is trying to claim that Hitler did nothing wrong is either completely ignorant or totally dishonest. So, anyhow, I hope that will give you some ammunition if you see any of those sort of absurd claims and so forth. If people are you see people say that occasionally. I just found it personally annoying. I don't like it when people are attempting to pass off bullshit as the truth, and especially when they're trying to pass it off as some sort of deeper hidden truth that the great unwashed don't realize. And so if you're going to make claims, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what context they're trying to put it in. The point is, it is an absolutely false statement, and it's also false. Like I said, it's intrinsically false when you're talking about the Jews, because if Hitler hadn't done anything wrong, he wouldn't even been in a position to have to deal with about 90% of the Jews that they killed. Germany should not have been occupying those sections of Eastern Europe in the first place if he'd done nothing wrong. So whether you want to try to put it, spin it and put it in context of the Jews, to be honest, I genuinely don't understand what they think they're trying to accomplish. I mean, we're dealing with people who are not terribly bright here. And no, it hasn't stigmatized Germany for eternity. I mean, that's also more nonsense. Most people on this planet don't give a damn about the Holocaust. It was a long time ago. There are very, very few people for whom it is still living memory. It's still important to the baby boomers. It's less important to my generation. It is a total non-factor to my children's generation and beyond. The Holocaust card is played out. The Chinese, who killed 50 million of their own people, are not impressed by the fact that somebody managed to kill about 1/10 that number of some other folks. The Mexicans, the Mexican cartels don't care. The Asians don't care. The only people who still care about it, for the most part, are the Jews and people in the West who have a guilt complex. Okay? History is ugly. History is difficult. Well, yeah, of course every movie has a Nazi as a bad guy because, about 90% of the films being made are being made by people who are Jewish. So, that's their big bugaboo, and they'll probably continue doing that until China takes over, Once China takes over, then the bad guys will be whatever they typically are in Chinese culture. So, but the thing is that what's important is the truth. Yeah, the Japanese, yeah, we'll probably see a lot more bad Japanese. So the thing is, it's important to understand the truth, and there's nothing wrong with trolling and that sort of thing, and it's certainly quite effective when you're dealing with people who are accustomed to using shame as a weapon. But it's important that even if you're trolling, it's important to understand what the underlying truth actually is. So anyhow, that's all I got. So have a good evening. I hope your weekend was good, and we will look forward to seeing you this week. Take it easy.